Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed approach to assessing applicants for Allama Iqbal Open University's entrance examination. Which of the following methodologies would be most appropriate for a comprehensive and fair assessment of potential students, considering the diverse academic programs offered by AU? Option A. A methodology that primarily focuses on the recall of factual information and definitions across a wide range of subjects, with minimal emphasis on analytical skills. Option B. A methodology that relies heavily on subjective essay questions without clear marking rubrics, designed to gauge personal opinions and beliefs. Option C. A methodology that uses a single, high-stakes multiple-choice test covering only basic literacy and numeracy skills. Option D. A methodology that emphasizes problem-solving, critical thinking, and the application of knowledge in varied contexts, alongside foundational subject matter understanding. Correct answer is D. A methodology that emphasizes problem-solving, critical thinking, and the application of knowledge in varied contexts, alongside foundational subject matter understanding. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to critically assess the effectiveness of different impact assessment methodologies in the context of university entrance examinations, specifically for Allama Iqbal Open University, AU. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of each approach and how they align with the stated goals of a fair and comprehensive entrance exam, while adhering to the implicit regulatory framework governing such examinations in Pakistan. Careful judgment is required to discern which methodology best serves the purpose of identifying suitable candidates for AU diverse programs. The correct approach involves selecting the methodology that most effectively measures a broad range of aptitudes relevant to university-level study, beyond rote memorization, and that can be implemented fairly and transparently within the AU examination system. This approach is justified by the implicit regulatory expectation for entrance examinations to be predictive of academic success, and to uphold principles of fairness and equal opportunity. A methodology that incorporates diverse assessment techniques, such as problem-solving, critical thinking, and contextual application of knowledge, is more likely to identify candidates who possess the necessary skills and potential for higher education at AU. An incorrect approach would be to favor a methodology that relies solely on a narrow set of skills, such as memorization of factual information, as this fails to adequately assess a candidate's potential for critical engagement with academic material. This is an ethical failure as it may disadvantage candidates with strong analytical abilities but weaker recall. Another incorrect approach would be to select a methodology that is overly complex or resource-intensive to implement, as this could lead to logistical challenges and potential inconsistencies in administration, thereby compromising the fairness of the examination process. This is a regulatory failure, as it may not align with the operational guidelines and resource constraints of AU. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize a methodology that is easily susceptible to external influences or coaching, as this undermines the integrity of the entrance examination and the principle of merit-based selection. The professional reasoning process for similar situations involves first understanding the specific objectives of the assessment, in this case, AU entrance exam, then critically evaluating each proposed methodology against these objectives, considering its scope, validity, reliability, fairness, and practicality of implementation within the given institutional context. Finally, selecting the approach that best balances these factors and aligns with the ethical and regulatory standards for educational assessments. Question 2. Upon reviewing the preliminary enrollment data for the upcoming academic session, the admissions department has requested immediate access to these figures for strategic planning purposes. However, the data processing team has flagged several inconsistencies that require further investigation before the figures can be considered final. What is the most responsible course of action to ensure both timely information and data integrity? Option A. Conduct a rapid validation of the flagged inconsistencies, and if deemed minor and unlikely to significantly alter the overall trend, release the preliminary figures with a clear disclaimer regarding their provisional nature and the ongoing validation process. Option B. Withhold all enrollment data until the final audited figures are compiled and verified, regardless of the admissions department's urgent need. Option C. Immediately release the preliminary enrollment figures as requested, assuming that any minor errors will be corrected in subsequent updates. Option D. Release the preliminary enrollment figures with a generic disclaimer stating that the data is subject to change without specifying the nature of the potential changes or the ongoing validation efforts. The correct answer is A. Conduct a rapid validation of the flagged inconsistencies, and if deemed minor and unlikely to significantly alter the overall trend, release the preliminary figures with a clear disclaimer regarding their provisional nature and the ongoing validation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for enrollment data and the ethical obligation to ensure data accuracy and integrity. The pressure to provide timely information must be balanced against the risk of disseminating potentially flawed data, which could mislead stakeholders and impact strategic decisions. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension responsibly. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes data validation and verification before dissemination. This approach upholds professional integrity by ensuring that any reported information is reliable and has undergone appropriate scrutiny. Specifically, it aligns with the Allama Iqbal Open University's commitment to academic excellence and transparent reporting, which implicitly requires that all official data presented is accurate. The ethical imperative is to avoid misrepresentation and to provide stakeholders with a true and fair view of the university's performance, even if it means a slight delay in reporting. An incorrect approach would be to immediately release the preliminary enrollment figures without further verification. This fails to acknowledge the potential for errors in initial data collection or processing, thereby violating the principle of accuracy in reporting. Such an action could lead to misinformed decisions by university management, prospective students, or funding bodies, and would undermine the credibility of the university's statistical reporting. Another incorrect approach would be to withhold all enrollment data until the final, audited figures are available, even if preliminary, validated data could be useful for immediate planning. This demonstrates a lack of proactive problem solving and an unwillingness to provide timely, albeit preliminary, insights when appropriate safeguards are in place. It prioritizes absolute certainty over practical utility, potentially hindering necessary operational adjustments. A further incorrect approach would be to release the preliminary figures with a vague disclaimer about their potential inaccuracy. While acknowledging potential issues, this approach still risks the dissemination of misleading information without providing sufficient context or a clear plan for correction. It does not demonstrate a commitment to rigorous data management and can be perceived as an attempt to shift blame rather than take responsibility for data quality. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective, providing enrollment data, and the potential risks, data inaccuracy. They should then assess the feasibility of mitigating those risks through validation processes. If preliminary data can be validated to a reasonable degree of confidence, it should be released with clear caveats. If significant uncertainty remains, it is more prudent to delay dissemination until greater accuracy can be assured, communicating the reasons for the delay transparently. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows a proposal for assessing the impact of a new AU entrance exam preparation module. Which of the following approaches would provide the most comprehensive and professionally sound evaluation? Option A. A purely quantitative approach focusing solely on the percentage increase in mock exam scores among participants. Option B. A methodology that prioritizes the number of hours spent by applicants on the module, assuming more time directly correlates with greater impact. Option C. A mixed methods approach combining pre- and post-module surveys measuring perceived preparedness and confidence, alongside analysis of applicant performance data on mock exams and actual entrance exam scores. Option D. An approach relying exclusively on qualitative feedback from a small, self-selected group of participants about their general feelings towards the module. Correct answer is C. A mixed methods approach combining pre- and post-module surveys measuring perceived preparedness and confidence, alongside analysis of applicant performance data on mock exams and actual entrance exam scores. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to critically assess the effectiveness and appropriateness of different methodologies for evaluating the impact of a proposed academic program. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of each approach and aligning them with the specific context of an entrance exam for Allama Iqbal Open University (AU), which implies a need for methods that are accessible, relevant to a diverse applicant pool, and aligned with AU educational mission. Careful judgment is required to select the most suitable approach that provides meaningful insights without being overly complex or resource-intensive. The correct approach involves selecting a methodology that is comprehensive, considers both qualitative and quantitative aspects, and is practical for an entrance exam context. This approach is right because it acknowledges that impact assessment is multifaceted. It allows for the collection of diverse data points that can paint a holistic picture of the program's potential effects on students, the university, and potentially the wider community. This aligns with the principles of thorough evaluation, which is implicitly expected in any academic assessment process, including entrance exams, to ensure fairness and effectiveness. While specific AU regulations for entrance exam impact assessment might not be explicitly detailed in a public document, the general principles of good academic practice and program evaluation, which are universally understood in educational institutions, would favor a balanced and robust approach. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, easily quantifiable metrics would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of depth in impact assessment, potentially overlooking crucial qualitative factors like student motivation, long-term learning outcomes, or the program's alignment with societal needs, which are vital for a comprehensive understanding of impact. Another incorrect approach that relies heavily on anecdotal evidence without structured data collection would also be professionally flawed. This is because anecdotal evidence is subjective, prone to bias, and lacks the rigor required for a credible impact assessment, failing to provide objective grounds for decision-making. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes complex statistical modeling without considering the accessibility of data or the interpretability of results for the intended audience, e.g., admissions committees, program developers, would be inappropriate. This approach fails to be practical and may lead to conclusions that are difficult to translate into actionable insights, undermining the purpose of the assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the objectives of the assessment. What specific impacts are we trying to measure? 2. Identifying the stakeholders. Who will use this assessment and what information do they need? 3. Considering the resources available. What data can be realistically collected and analyzed? 4. Evaluating different methodologies against these criteria. Which approach offers the most relevant, reliable, and actionable insights? 5. Prioritizing a balanced approach, combining qualitative and quantitative data where appropriate for a comprehensive view. Question 4. Strategic planning requires a thorough evaluation of resource allocation proposals to ensure alignment with the university's long-term vision and operational integrity. Considering the Allama Iqbal Open University's commitment to accessible and quality education, which of the following approaches best reflects a responsible and compliant method for assessing a proposal to significantly increase funding for a single academic department, potentially at the expense of other university-wide initiatives? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the proposal's effects on student access, program quality across all departments, faculty development, and the university's strategic goals, while ensuring compliance with AU financial regulations and HEC guidelines for resource management. Option B. Prove the proposal immediately to support the department's growth, assuming that strengthening one area will indirectly benefit the entire university through increased prestige. Option C. Prioritize cost-cutting measures across all departments to free up funds for the proposed increase, without a detailed analysis of the consequences for essential services or academic programs. Option D. Allocate the requested funds based on the department's historical performance and the persuasive arguments of its head, bypassing a formal review process to expedite the decision. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the proposal's effects on student access, program quality across all departments, faculty development, and the university's strategic goals, while ensuring compliance with AU financial regulations and HEC guidelines for resource management. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in educational institutions where resource allocation must align with strategic goals while adhering to regulatory frameworks. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate needs of a specific department with the broader, long-term vision of the university, ensuring that decisions are not only financially sound, but also ethically justifiable and compliant with Allama, Iqbal Open Universities, governing regulations and guidelines for entrance exams. Careful judgment is required to avoid short-sighted decisions that could compromise the quality of education or the integrity of the admission process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the long-term implications of resource allocation on student access, program quality, and the university's overall strategic objectives, as mandated by AU internal policies and any relevant higher education commission. Guidelines pertaining to university operations and admissions. This approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, forward-looking, and aligned with the university's mission. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate departmental demands without considering the broader impact fails to uphold the principles of equitable resource distribution and strategic alignment. This could lead to a situation where essential university-wide initiatives, such as enhancing the accessibility of entrance exams for a wider demographic or improving the quality of core academic programs, are underfunded. Such a decision would be ethically questionable as it potentially disadvantages future students and compromises the university's commitment to its overarching mission. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost-cutting without evaluating the impact on educational quality or student experience would be detrimental. This could lead to a reduction in essential services or faculty support, negatively affecting the learning environment and potentially violating HEC standards for academic delivery. A third incorrect approach that involves bypassing established approval processes for resource allocation, even with good intentions, undermines institutional governance and transparency. This could lead to inconsistencies in decision-making and a lack of accountability, which are critical elements of sound university management as outlined in AU administrative procedures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the strategic objectives. This is followed by identifying all potential impacts of a decision, both positive and negative, across various university functions. Subsequently, they should gather relevant data and consult with stakeholders, including faculty, administration, and potentially student representatives, to inform their assessment. Finally, decisions should be made in accordance with established policies, ethical principles, and regulatory requirements, with a clear rationale documented for transparency and accountability. Question 5. Examination of the data shows a significant increase in the number of applications received for the upcoming academic session. However, preliminary checks indicate that a substantial portion of these applications are incomplete or lack the required supporting documentation. The admissions department is under pressure to provide an immediate enrollment projection to the university administration. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional standards for university admissions and data reporting? Option A. Conduct a thorough verification and validation of all applications, ensuring completeness and eligibility before generating any enrollment projections, even if this delays the initial report. Option B. Proceed with reporting the total number of applications received as the primary indicator of enrollment potential, while noting that a full verification process is ongoing. Option C. Focus on reporting only the applications that are currently complete and verified, excluding all others from the initial projection to present a more concrete, albeit smaller, figure. Option D. Expedite the verification process by accepting self-declared completeness from applicants and reporting these figures immediately to meet the administration's deadline. The correct answer is B. Proceed with reporting the total number of applications received as the primary indicator of enrollment potential, while noting that a full verification process is ongoing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for enrollment data and the ethical obligation to ensure data accuracy and integrity. The pressure to report numbers quickly can lead to rushed or incomplete data collection, potentially misrepresenting the true state of admissions. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for timely information with the imperative of providing reliable data for strategic decision-making and external reporting. The correct approach involves a thorough review and validation of all collected enrollment data before it is finalized and disseminated. This ensures that the data accurately reflects the actual student intake, accounting for all necessary checks and balances. This aligns with the general principles of academic integrity and responsible data management expected of educational institutions, which are implicitly governed by the Allama Iqbal Open University's commitment to quality education and transparent operations. While specific detailed regulations for entrance exam data handling might not be explicitly detailed in a publicly accessible document for this exam, the overarching ethical framework of academic institutions mandates accuracy and reliability in all reporting. An approach that focuses solely on the quantity of applications received without verifying their completeness or eligibility is ethically flawed. It prioritizes a superficial metric over the substantive reality of admitted students, potentially misleading stakeholders about the university's actual capacity and student body. This failure to ensure data integrity violates the implicit trust placed in the university to provide accurate information. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of reporting over data accuracy by accepting preliminary or unverified figures. This bypasses essential quality control steps, increasing the risk of errors and misrepresentation. Such haste undermines the credibility of the university's reporting and can lead to poor strategic decisions based on faulty information. This also fails to uphold the principle of due diligence in data handling. A third incorrect approach, which involves selectively reporting only the most favorable application numbers while omitting others, constitutes a deliberate misrepresentation of facts. This is a severe ethical breach, as it actively distorts reality to create a false impression. It directly contravenes the principles of honesty and transparency that are fundamental to any academic institution. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify the core objective reporting enrollment data. Second, recognize the potential conflicts or risks pressure for speed vs. data accuracy. Third, consult relevant institutional policies or ethical guidelines. Even if implicit, the commitment to academic integrity is paramount. Fourth, prioritize accuracy and completeness over speed, implementing validation checks. Fifth, communicate any delays or challenges transparently to stakeholders. Finally, ensure that the final report is a true and fair representation of the data. Question 6. Assessment of a candidate's preparedness for the Allama Iqbal Open University entrance exam, considering their approach to obtaining answers for challenging questions during the examination. Option A. Contacting a friend outside the examination hall for hints on challenging questions. Option B. Relying solely on personal knowledge and understanding to answer all examination questions, even if it means leaving some questions unanswered. Option C. Discreetly seeking assistance from a fellow candidate for difficult questions during the exam. Option D. Attempting to access pre-prepared notes or external resources not permitted by the examination rules. The correct answer is B. Relying solely on personal knowledge and understanding to answer all examination questions, even if it means leaving some questions unanswered. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic integrity within the context of university entrance examinations. The pressure to perform well, coupled with the availability of potentially unauthorized assistance, creates a conflict between personal ambition and adherence to established rules. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the admission process is fair, equitable, and upholds the standards of Allama Iqbal Open University. The correct approach involves a commitment to personal effort and academic honesty. This means relying solely on one's own knowledge and preparation to answer the examination questions. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of integrity and fairness expected of all candidates seeking admission to an educational institution. Furthermore, it directly upholds the spirit and letter of any examination regulations that prohibit cheating or the use of unauthorized aids, ensuring that the assessment accurately reflects the candidate's abilities. An incorrect approach that involves seeking or using unauthorized assistance from external sources, such as sharing questions or answers, represents a severe breach of academic integrity. This failure directly violates the rules of the examination and undermines the fairness of the admission process for all other candidates. It demonstrates a lack of personal responsibility and a willingness to engage in dishonest practices, which are antithetical to the values of an academic institution. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to bribe or influence examination officials, is not only a violation of examination rules, but also constitutes a serious ethical and potentially legal offense. This action corrupts the integrity of the entire admission system and is unacceptable in any professional or academic setting. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the examination rules and ethical guidelines. Candidates must prioritize honesty and self-reliance. When faced with a temptation to deviate from these principles, they should consider the long-term consequences of their actions, including potential disqualification, damage to their reputation, and the erosion of trust in the academic system. The decision-making framework should always lean towards upholding integrity, even if it means a less favorable immediate outcome. Question 7. Which approach would be most appropriate for the admissions committee at Allama Iqbal Open University when reviewing applications for the upcoming academic year, given a scenario where initial applicant numbers are lower than anticipated, but several applications show minor inconsistencies in submitted academic transcripts? Option A. Conduct a thorough verification of all submitted documents. Investigate any inconsistencies by seeking clarification from applicants or their previous institutions, and make admission decisions strictly based on the published admission criteria. Option B. Expedite the admission process by prioritizing meeting enrollment targets and overlook minor inconsistencies in academic transcripts to ensure sufficient student numbers. Option C. Accept all applications at face value based on self-declarations of qualification, assuming applicants have accurately represented their academic achievements to quickly fill available seats. Option D. Inform applicants that the admission criteria have been temporarily adjusted to accommodate a wider range of academic backgrounds due to lower applicant numbers, and proceed with admissions based on these revised criteria. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough verification of all submitted documents. Investigate any inconsistencies by seeking clarification from applicants or their previous institutions, and make admission decisions strictly based on the published admission criteria. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions under potentially evolving admission criteria. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay discrepancies, but adherence to established admission policies and regulatory guidelines is paramount. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness to all applicants and to maintain the university's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of all applicants against the published admission criteria, with a specific focus on verifying the authenticity and completeness of submitted documents. This aligns with the Allama Iqbal Open University's commitment to merit-based admissions and the regulatory framework governing higher education institutions in Pakistan, which emphasizes transparency and adherence to established admission policies. Ethically, it upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all prospective students. An approach that prioritizes meeting enrollment targets by overlooking discrepancies in applicant qualifications would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. It would violate the principle of fairness and could lead to the admission of unqualified students, undermining the academic standards of the university. This approach fails to uphold the integrity of the admission process and could expose the university to scrutiny and potential sanctions from regulatory bodies overseeing higher education. Another incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily change admission criteria mid-application cycle to accommodate a larger number of applicants, especially if these changes are not formally approved or communicated transparently. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to established university policies and regulatory requirements for admission processes, which typically mandate clear, consistent, and pre-published criteria. Such an action would create an unfair playing field for applicants who base their applications on the original criteria. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-declaration of qualifications without any independent verification, particularly when there are indicators of potential issues. This bypasses essential due diligence expected of educational institutions and fails to meet the regulatory obligation to ensure that admitted students meet the minimum academic requirements. It creates a significant risk of admitting students who are not adequately prepared for university-level study, thereby compromising the quality of education and the university's standing. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic review of admission policies and guidelines, followed by an objective evaluation of each applicant's credentials. When discrepancies arise, the process should include clear protocols for seeking clarification, requesting additional documentation, and making decisions based on established criteria and regulatory compliance. Transparency and fairness should be maintained throughout the process, with a commitment to upholding the academic integrity of the institution. Question 8. Implementation of a new standardized assessment for Allama, Iqbal Open University Entrance Examinations is being considered to improve efficiency and predictive validity. Which approach to assessing the impact of this new methodology best aligns with the principles of fairness and academic integrity expected in university admissions? Option A. Immediately replace the current assessment with the new one, assuming its efficiency gains will automatically lead to better outcomes. Option B. Adopt the new assessment based on its successful use in a different country's university system, without specific adaptation or testing for the AU context. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving pilot testing, statistical analysis of results against academic performance, and stakeholder feedback before full implementation. Option D. Prioritize the new assessment based on its lower cost and perceived ease of administration, without extensive prior validation. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment involving pilot testing, statistical analysis of results against academic performance, and stakeholder feedback before full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the need to balance institutional goals with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance within the specific context of Allama Iqbal Open University AU entrance exams. Core difficulty lies in ensuring fairness and academic integrity while implementing a new assessment methodology. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective in evaluating candidates and adheres to the established guidelines for AU admissions. The correct approach involves a phased and consultative implementation of the impact assessment. This is justified by the need for a thorough understanding of potential consequences before widespread adoption. It aligns with principles of good governance and responsible innovation, ensuring that any new assessment method is rigorously tested for validity, reliability, and fairness. This approach allows for the identification and mitigation of biases, ensuring that the assessment accurately reflects candidates' abilities without disadvantaging specific groups, a key ethical consideration in educational admissions. Furthermore, it allows for alignment with AU stated objectives for its entrance examinations, which are typically to identify suitable candidates for higher education. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived efficiency of a new assessment method without prior impact assessment fails to consider potential unintended consequences. This could lead to discriminatory outcomes, violating principles of equal opportunity and fairness in education, which are implicitly or explicitly part of AU operational framework. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over a comprehensive evaluation risks implementing an assessment that is not fit for purpose, potentially admitting students who are not adequately prepared or overlooking deserving candidates. This undermines the academic standards of the university. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the success of similar assessments in different contexts without specific validation for AU unique student demographic and program requirements is also professionally unsound. It ignores the principle of context-specific evaluation and could lead to inaccurate admissions decisions, impacting both individual candidates and the university's academic profile. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of the assessment. This should be followed by a thorough review of existing AU policies and any relevant national educational guidelines. The next step involves identifying potential assessment methodologies and conducting a preliminary impact assessment for each, considering factors like validity, reliability, fairness, cost, and administrative feasibility. Stakeholder consultation, e.g., with faculty, admissions officers, and potentially student representatives, is crucial. Based on this comprehensive evaluation, the most suitable approach, which demonstrably meets objectives while adhering to ethical and regulatory standards, should be selected for implementation, often with a pilot phase. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal a significant number of applications for the upcoming academic year have discrepancies between self-reported academic achievements and uploaded supporting documents. The admissions committee is under pressure to meet enrollment targets, Which approach best addresses this situation while upholding academic integrity and university regulations? Option A. Conduct a thorough, case-by-case review of all flagged applications, cross-referencing information with submitted documents and verifying against university admission criteria before making any decisions. Option B. Admit all applicants with flagged discrepancies to expedite the admissions process and meet enrollment targets, assuming the discrepancies are minor. Option C. Randomly select a small percentage of the flagged applications for a detailed review, while approving the rest to manage the workload. Option D. Immediately reject all applications with discrepancies to avoid any potential issues with academic integrity, regardless of the nature of the discrepancy. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough case-by-case review of all flagged applications, cross-referencing information with submitted documents and verifying against university admission criteria before making any decisions. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions and the potential for errors in the application process. The pressure to admit a sufficient number of students for program viability can create a conflict with the need for thorough and accurate verification. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are fair, transparent, and compliant with Allama, Iqbal Open University's established admission policies and any relevant higher education commission (HEC) guidelines. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the flagged applications, cross-referencing the information with supporting documents and university admission criteria. This approach is right because it upholds the principle of fairness and due diligence in admissions. It ensures that all applicants are evaluated consistently against established standards, preventing potential bias or the admission of unqualified candidates. This aligns with the ethical obligation of educational institutions to maintain academic standards and the regulatory expectation of transparent and equitable admission processes, as often outlined by bodies like the HEC in Pakistan. An approach that involves immediately rejecting all flagged applications without further investigation is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of administrative errors or genuine mitigating circumstances, leading to unfairness and potentially overlooking deserving candidates. It also bypasses the established quality control process, undermining its purpose. Another incorrect approach, which is to admit all flagged applications to avoid delays and potential disputes, is also professionally unacceptable. This disregards the purpose of the quality control measures and risks admitting students who may not meet the required academic standards or have provided inaccurate information. This can compromise the academic reputation of the university and lead to future academic difficulties for the admitted students. A further incorrect approach, which is to only review a small sample of the flagged applications, is professionally unacceptable. This is an arbitrary and insufficient method of quality control. It fails to address the systemic issue identified by the quality control measures and leaves the majority of flagged applications unverified, thus not fulfilling the university's responsibility to ensure the integrity of its admissions process. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, fairness, and compliance. This involves 1. Acknowledging and investigating all identified discrepancies. 2. Applying established admission policies consistently. 3. Documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them. 4. Escalating complex or ambiguous cases to a higher authority or committee for review. 5. Ensuring that the process is transparent to applicants where appropriate. Question 10. During the evaluation of an applicant's eligibility for a Bachelor of Arts program at Allama Iqbal Open University, it is noted that their previous academic qualifications from a different institution do not precisely match the listed prerequisite courses. The applicant has completed a diploma in a related field, which covers many of the same subject areas, but with different course titles and credit hour allocations. Which of the following approaches best reflects a fair and thorough assessment process aligned with AU admission guidelines? Option A. Admit the applicant without any further evaluation, assuming the diploma is a direct and complete substitute for all prerequisite courses. Option B. Request the applicant to retake all the prerequisite courses at another accredited institution before reapplying to AU. Option C. Conduct a detailed impact assessment of the applicant's diploma coursework and experience to determine if the learning outcomes and competencies align with the AU program's prerequisites, and if any minor bridging support is needed. Option D. Reject the application outright due to the absence of the exact prerequisite course titles as specified in the program requirements. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed impact assessment of the applicant's diploma coursework and experience to determine if the learning outcomes and competencies align with the AU program's prerequisites, and if any minor bridging support is needed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the applicant's academic background, while relevant, does not perfectly align with the specific program requirements at Allama Iqbal Open University, AU. The admissions committee must balance the desire to admit promising candidates with the need to ensure they possess the foundational knowledge and skills necessary for success in the chosen program. This requires a nuanced assessment that goes beyond a simple checklist of qualifications. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment of the applicant's prior learning and experience against the AU program's learning outcomes and prerequisites. This means evaluating how the applicant's existing knowledge, even if acquired through non-traditional means or different course structures, can be leveraged to meet the program's demands. It requires identifying potential gaps and proposing strategies for bridging them, such as recommending foundational readings, introductory modules, or a probationary period. This aligns with AU commitment to accessible education and recognizing diverse learning pathways, ensuring that admission decisions are fair, equitable, and focused on the applicant's potential for academic success within the AU framework. An incorrect approach would be to rigidly adhere to a predefined list of equivalent courses without considering the depth and breadth of the applicant's actual learning. This fails to acknowledge that different institutions may have varying curricula and assessment methods. Such a rigid approach could unfairly exclude a capable candidate who has acquired equivalent competencies through alternative means. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the application based solely on the absence of a specific course title, without undertaking any further investigation into the applicant's academic record or potential. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to apply a holistic evaluation process, potentially overlooking a strong candidate who could contribute positively to the AU academic community. A further incorrect approach would be to admit the applicant without any consideration of potential academic challenges, assuming their prior experience is a direct substitute for all program requirements. This could lead to the applicant struggling and ultimately failing, which is detrimental to both the student and the university. It fails to uphold the academic standards and support mechanisms expected of AU. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Thoroughly reviewing the applicant's submitted documents, including transcripts, syllabi, if available, and personal statements. 2. Identifying the core competencies and knowledge areas required by the AU program. 3. Conducting a comparative analysis of the applicant's acquired knowledge against these program requirements, looking for equivalencies in learning outcomes rather than just course titles. 4. If significant gaps are identified, exploring potential bridging mechanisms or alternative admission pathways. 5. Making a well-reasoned decision based on the comprehensive assessment of the applicant's potential for success, in line with AU admission policies and educational philosophy. Question 11. The risk matrix shows that a proposed change to the Allama Iqbal Open University entrance exam format has a high likelihood of increasing administrative efficiency, but a moderate risk of disadvantaging applicants from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. Which impact assessment approach would best address the ethical and regulatory considerations for this university? Option A. An assessment that measures the perceived difficulty of the new exam format by a small group of current students. Option B. An assessment focused primarily on the reduction of logistical costs and processing times for the examination administration. Option C. A comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the exam's effect on candidate selection fairness, academic suitability, and alignment with national educational access goals. Option D. An assessment that quantifies the potential for increased pass rates without considering the underlying reasons for such an increase. Correct answer is C. A comprehensive impact assessment evaluating the exam's effect on candidate selection fairness, academic suitability, and alignment with national educational access goals. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to critically evaluate the effectiveness of different impact assessment approaches in the context of university entrance examinations, specifically for Allama Iqbal Open University. The challenge lies in discerning which approach best aligns with the stated goal of ensuring a fair and relevant assessment process, considering the unique regulatory framework and objectives of such an institution. Careful judgment is needed to move beyond superficial understanding and identify the approach that truly addresses the core purpose of entrance exams. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the broader implications of the entrance exam on various stakeholders, including prospective students, the university's academic standards, and the overall educational landscape in Pakistan. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of good governance and educational policy, which emphasize fairness, equity, and the selection of candidates who are best suited for higher education. Specifically, within the context of Allama Iqbal Open University, which aims to provide accessible education, an impact assessment that considers accessibility, relevance of content to diverse backgrounds, and the potential for bias is crucial. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of ensuring a transparent and equitable admission process, fostering educational opportunities, and maintaining academic integrity, as per national educational guidelines. An approach that focuses solely on the immediate administrative efficiency of the exam process is incorrect. This fails to consider the ethical imperative of ensuring the assessment is fair and serves the educational mission of the university. It overlooks the potential negative impacts on applicants who might be disadvantaged by a narrow focus. An approach that prioritizes the perceived difficulty of the exam without a clear link to learning outcomes or suitability for university study is also incorrect. This can lead to a biased selection process, potentially excluding deserving candidates based on arbitrary difficulty rather than actual academic potential or preparedness. It disregards the ethical obligation to select students based on merit and suitability for the chosen program of study. An approach that solely examines the cost-effectiveness of the examination without considering its validity and reliability as an assessment tool is professionally unacceptable. While financial prudence is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental purpose of an entrance exam, which is to accurately measure the aptitude and knowledge of candidates. This approach fails to meet the ethical standard of conducting a valid and reliable assessment, potentially leading to the admission of unqualified students or the rejection of qualified ones. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted evaluation. First, clearly define the objectives of the assessment. Second, identify all relevant stakeholders and potential impacts. Third, consider the ethical principles of fairness, validity, reliability, and equity. Fourth, consult relevant national educational policies and guidelines applicable to university admissions in Pakistan. Finally, select the assessment approach that best balances these considerations to achieve the desired outcomes in a responsible and ethical manner. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that a significant number of applicants struggle to effectively prepare for the Allama Iqbal Open University's entrance examination due to a lack of strategic study planning. Which of the following approaches would be most effective in guiding applicants towards successful preparation? Option A. Thoroughly reviewing past examination papers, the official syllabus, and university admission guidelines to understand the scope, format, and expected depth of knowledge. Option B. Focusing exclusively on memorizing all content from standard textbooks relevant to the subject areas. Option C. Relying solely on general online study tips and forums for preparation advice without consulting official university materials. Option D. Prioritizing the study of advanced topics and complex theories that are likely to impress examiners, even if not explicitly mentioned in the syllabus. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly reviewing past examination papers, the official syllabus, and university admission guidelines to understand the scope, format, and expected depth of knowledge. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to critically evaluate the effectiveness of different approaches to understanding the Allama Iqbal Open University's entrance examination framework. The challenge lies in discerning which approach aligns best with the stated goal of preparing for the exam, considering the implicit need to understand its structure, content, and assessment methodologies. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial understanding and identify an approach that fosters deep learning and strategic preparation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of past examination papers, syllabi, and official university guidelines. This method is justified because it directly addresses the core components of the entrance exam. By analyzing past papers, applicants can identify recurring themes, question types, and the depth of knowledge expected. Reviewing syllabi ensures that preparation is focused on the prescribed curriculum. Referencing official university guidelines provides clarity on the examination's format, marking scheme, and any specific instructions, all of which are crucial for effective preparation and are implicitly supported by the university's own framework for assessing candidates. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on memorizing textbook content without understanding the examination's context fails, because it neglects the application and analytical skills that entrance exams typically assess. This approach risks superficial learning and an inability to adapt to varied question formats. Another incorrect approach that relies only on general study tips found online, without consulting official university resources, is flawed because it lacks specificity and may not reflect the actual requirements or nuances of the Allama, Iqbal Open University's entrance exam. Such generic advice can lead to misdirected effort and an incomplete understanding of what is truly being tested. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes learning advanced topics not covered in the syllabus is also problematic, as it diverts valuable study time from essential material and demonstrates a misunderstanding of the exam's scope. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic evaluation of available resources and their relevance to the specific objective. Professionals should prioritize official documentation and past performance data when preparing for assessments. They should then critically assess the scope and depth of information required, ensuring that their preparation strategy is targeted and efficient, rather than broad and unfocused. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows a statistically significant correlation between applicant performance on a standardized aptitude test and subsequent academic success in foundational courses. However, preliminary observations suggest a lower participation rate from applicants residing in remote rural areas in this specific test. Which approach best addresses the potential equity concerns arising from this observation? Option A. Reaffirm the validity of the aptitude test based on its strong correlation with academic success, assuming that any disparities in participation are due to inherent differences in educational background rather than methodological flaws. Option B. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to analyze whether the aptitude test's format, content, or administration methods inadvertently disadvantage applicants from remote rural areas, and explore alternative assessment modalities or support mechanisms. Option C. Expedite the processing of applications from urban areas to maintain the efficiency of the admissions cycle, while deferring any further investigation into rural applicant participation to a later, less critical period. Option D. Rely on feedback from current students who have successfully passed the aptitude test to gauge its fairness, without undertaking a formal, data-driven analysis of participation rates from different geographical regions. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to analyze whether the aptitude test's format, content, or administration methods inadvertently disadvantage applicants from remote rural areas, and explore alternative assessment modalities or support mechanisms. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university's entrance exam evaluation methodology, while seemingly efficient, may inadvertently create barriers to access for certain applicant groups. The challenge lies in balancing the need for a standardized and objective assessment with the ethical imperative of ensuring equitable opportunity for all prospective students, as mandated by principles of fairness and non-discrimination, often embedded in educational policy frameworks. Careful judgment is required to identify potential biases within the methodology and to propose improvements that uphold both academic standards and social equity. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential differential effects of the evaluation methodology on various demographic groups, including those from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, regions, or with different educational preparation. This approach is ethically justified, as it aligns with the principles of fairness and equity in education, aiming to identify and mitigate any unintended disadvantages. Regulatory frameworks governing educational institutions often emphasize the need for transparent and equitable admission processes, and an impact assessment directly addresses this by scrutinizing the methodology for potential discriminatory outcomes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the statistical efficiency of the current methodology, without considering its distributional effects, fails to meet ethical and potentially regulatory obligations. This approach overlooks the possibility that a statistically efficient method might disproportionately exclude qualified candidates from underrepresented groups, thereby violating principles of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of processing over thoroughness risks overlooking subtle biases that could lead to unfair outcomes. This prioritizes administrative convenience over substantive fairness, which is ethically unsound and may contravene guidelines promoting inclusive access to education. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence rather than systematic data collection to assess fairness is also professionally deficient. This lacks the rigor required to identify systemic issues and can lead to biased conclusions, failing to provide a reliable basis for improving the evaluation methodology. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the stated objectives of the evaluation methodology. This should be followed by a systematic analysis of its potential impacts on diverse applicant populations, utilizing both quantitative and qualitative data. The process should involve consulting relevant educational policies and ethical guidelines to ensure compliance and best practice. Finally, recommendations for improvement should be evidence-based, aiming to enhance both the fairness and effectiveness of the evaluation process. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows a statistically significant difference in pass rates between applicants from different geographical regions, with those from remote areas scoring lower on average, despite similar academic preparation levels. This disparity raises concerns about potential bias within the assessment tools or the evaluation process itself. Option A. Maintain the current evaluation methodology, arguing that its standardized nature ensures objectivity and that any observed differences are solely attributable to variations in applicant preparation. Option B. Immediately revise the scoring thresholds for applicants from remote areas to artificially inflate their pass rates and achieve demographic parity. Option C. Disregard the observed disparity, attributing it to random variation and focusing solely on the overall pass rate of the entrance examination. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the evaluation methodology, analyzing performance data across various demographic and geographical segments to identify specific areas of concern and propose targeted adjustments or supplementary support mechanisms. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the evaluation methodology, analyzing performance data across various demographic and geographical segments to identify specific areas of concern and propose targeted adjustments or supplementary support mechanisms. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university's entrance exam evaluation methodology, while aiming for fairness, has inadvertently created a situation where certain groups of applicants might be disadvantaged due to factors outside their academic merit. The challenge lies in balancing the need for a standardized evaluation process with the ethical imperative of ensuring equitable access and opportunity, particularly within the context of educational institutions like Allama Iqbal Open University, which often serve a diverse student population. Careful judgment is required to identify and rectify potential biases without compromising the integrity of the entrance examination. The correct approach involves a proactive and data-driven impact assessment of the evaluation methodology. This approach recognizes that even well-intentioned processes can have unintended consequences. By systematically analyzing the performance data across different demographic groups, the university can identify specific areas where the methodology might be disproportionately affecting certain applicants. This allows for targeted adjustments to the evaluation criteria or the introduction of supplementary support mechanisms, aligning with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory expectation for educational institutions to promote equal opportunity. Such an assessment would be guided by the principles of transparency and accountability inherent in educational governance frameworks. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss concerns about differential impact without empirical evidence, citing the standardized nature of the exam as sufficient justification. This fails to acknowledge the potential for systemic biases within standardized testing and ignores the ethical responsibility to ensure that the evaluation process does not create undue barriers for any group of applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to implement arbitrary changes to the evaluation criteria without a thorough impact assessment. This could lead to new, unforeseen biases and undermine the credibility of the entrance examination process. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the administrative ease of the current methodology, neglecting the potential negative consequences for applicant equity. This prioritizes operational efficiency over ethical considerations and the university's commitment to inclusive education. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a commitment to fairness and equity. This involves actively seeking feedback, collecting and analyzing relevant data, and engaging in a continuous improvement cycle for evaluation methodologies. When potential disparities are identified, the process should involve a thorough investigation into the root causes, followed by the development and implementation of evidence-based solutions that are transparent and justifiable within the established regulatory and ethical guidelines for educational institutions. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows a candidate applying for an undergraduate program at Allama Iqbal Open University has a lower than average score on their previous academic transcripts, but has provided a compelling personal statement detailing significant self-study in related fields and extensive community volunteer work, demonstrating leadership and problem-solving skills. Which approach best aligns with the principles of equitable access to higher education as promoted by the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan and the mission of Allama Iqbal Open University? Option A. Offer the applicant a place in a remedial or foundation program without further assessment, assuming their current academic standing necessitates it. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's personal statement, volunteer experience, and any supplementary evidence of learning to assess their potential for success in higher education, considering their background. Option C. Reject the application outright due to the insufficient academic scores, as this is the primary indicator of readiness for university study. Option D. Request additional standardized test scores that are not part of the standard admission requirements to definitively prove their academic capability. The correct answer is C. Reject the application outright due to the insufficient academic scores, as this is the primary indicator of readiness for university study. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the admissions committee must balance the university's commitment to academic excellence with its mandate to provide educational opportunities to a diverse range of students, including those who may not have had access to traditional preparatory pathways. The decision requires careful judgment to ensure fairness, equity, and adherence to Allama Iqbal Open University's AU admission policies, which are guided by the Higher Education Commission (HEC) of Pakistan's regulations. The correct approach involves a holistic review that considers the applicant's potential for success in higher education, taking into account their background and any mitigating circumstances. This aligns with AU mission to promote access to education and HEC guidelines that encourage inclusive admission practices. A thorough assessment of the applicant's motivation, relevant life experiences, and any evidence of self-directed learning demonstrates a commitment to evaluating potential beyond standardized metrics, thereby upholding ethical principles of fairness and opportunity. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's previous academic record without considering the context of their educational background. This fails to acknowledge potential systemic disadvantages or alternative learning experiences that might not be reflected in traditional grades. Such an approach could lead to the exclusion of promising candidates who possess the drive and aptitude for university-level study, but have faced barriers to achieving high marks in conventional settings. This would be contrary to the spirit of inclusive education promoted by AU and HEC. Another incorrect approach would be to apply a rigid, one-size-fits-all criterion that ignores the unique circumstances of each applicant. This overlooks the importance of individual assessment and can perpetuate inequalities. Adhering strictly to a single metric without considering the broader picture of an applicant's potential and background would be ethically questionable and inconsistent with the principles of equitable access to higher education. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted evaluation. This includes understanding the specific admission criteria and policies of AU, as well as relevant HEC guidelines. It requires actively seeking information about the applicant's background, motivations, and any evidence of their capacity to succeed. Professionals should employ a balanced judgment that considers both academic preparedness and demonstrated potential, ensuring that the evaluation process is fair, transparent, and aligned with the institution's mission and regulatory framework. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed shift towards a more qualitative assessment of critical thinking skills, incorporating scenario-based problem-solving exercises that require candidates to articulate their reasoning processes in written responses, rather than relying solely on multiple-choice questions that test factual recall. This new methodology aims to provide a deeper insight into a candidate's analytical abilities. Option A. The proposed methodology is appropriate as it aligns with the AU stated goal of fostering critical thinking and analytical skills among its students, and the shift towards qualitative assessment is a recognized method for evaluating these higher-order cognitive abilities within educational contexts. Option B. The proposed methodology is inappropriate because it deviates significantly from the established format of objective, multiple-choice questions, which are universally recognized for their efficiency and objectivity in large-scale entrance examinations. Option C. The proposed methodology is appropriate because it introduces innovative assessment techniques that are likely to impress external accreditation bodies, regardless of their direct relevance to AU-specific academic programs or candidate pool. Option D. The proposed methodology is inappropriate because it requires extensive training for examiners to interpret subjective written responses, which would significantly increase the operational costs and time required for the entrance exam administration. The correct answer is A. The proposed methodology is appropriate as it aligns with the AU stated goal of fostering critical thinking and analytical skills among its students, and the shift towards qualitative assessment is a recognized method for evaluating these higher-order cognitive abilities within educational contexts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the proposed impact assessment methodology, while seemingly comprehensive, may not align with the specific requirements and ethical considerations mandated by the Allama Iqbal Open University AU entrance exam framework. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that the assessment not only covers relevant areas, but also adheres to the principles of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity, as implicitly or explicitly defined by AU examination guidelines. Careful judgment is required to discern whether the proposed methodology is a genuine improvement or a deviation that could compromise the validity and fairness of the entrance exam. The correct approach involves critically examining the proposed methodology against the established regulatory framework and guidelines for the AU entrance exam. This means verifying if the methodology's components are designed to accurately measure the aptitude and knowledge deemed essential for AU programs, and if it adheres to principles of equitable assessment. For instance, if the AU guidelines emphasize a broad assessment of foundational knowledge, a methodology that overly focuses on niche areas without a clear justification tied to program outcomes would be problematic. The ethical justification for this approach stems from the responsibility to uphold the integrity of the admission process, ensuring that all candidates are assessed fairly, and that the exam serves its intended purpose of selecting suitable students. An incorrect approach would be to adopt the proposed methodology without rigorous scrutiny, assuming that any new methodology is inherently better. This could lead to the implementation of an assessment that is biased, irrelevant to AU academic objectives, or fails to identify the most qualified candidates. For example, if the proposed methodology introduces subjective evaluation criteria that are not clearly defined or standardized, it could lead to inconsistent scoring and unfairness, violating the principle of equitable assessment. Another failure would be to prioritize a methodology that is complex or resource-intensive without demonstrating a clear, quantifiable improvement in assessment accuracy or efficiency, potentially misallocating resources and creating unnecessary barriers for candidates. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of any proposed changes to examination methodologies. This includes 1. Understanding the existing AU entrance exam framework and its objectives. 2. clearly defining the purpose and expected outcomes of the proposed methodology. 3. Conducting a comparative analysis of the proposed methodology against the current one, focusing on alignment with AU-specific requirements and ethical standards. 4. Seeking expert opinion or pilot testing, where appropriate, to validate the effectiveness and fairness of the proposed changes. 5. Documenting the rationale for adoption or rejection of the proposed methodology, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows a candidate's potential impact on the academic environment and their suitability for the chosen program at Allama, Iqbal Open University. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the AU stipulated impact assessment framework for its entrance examinations? Option A. An assessment primarily driven by the candidate's score on a single, high-stakes standardized aptitude test, with minimal consideration for other submitted documentation. Option B. A comprehensive assessment that considers academic transcripts, relevant extracurricular activities, a statement of purpose articulating program alignment, and performance in any prescribed entrance tests, all weighed according to AU-published admission criteria. Option C. An evaluation based on informal recommendations and personal interviews, where the candidate's perceived personality traits are given greater weight than their academic record. Option D. A review focused exclusively on the candidate's past performance in unrelated academic disciplines, without assessing their understanding of or interest in the specific program they are applying for. Correct answer is B. A comprehensive assessment that considers academic transcripts, relevant extracurricular activities, a statement of purpose articulating program alignment, and performance in any prescribed entrance tests, all weighed according to AU-published admission criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university entrance exam's regulatory framework, specifically concerning the Allama Iqbal Open University AU entrance exam guidelines, mandates a particular approach to impact assessment. The challenge lies in correctly identifying and applying the stipulated methodology, ensuring that the assessment aligns with the AU-stated objectives and ethical considerations for educational admissions. Misinterpreting or deviating from these guidelines can lead to flawed evaluations, potentially disadvantaging deserving candidates or admitting unsuitable ones, thereby undermining the integrity of the admission process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the candidate's academic background, extracurricular achievements, and a demonstrated understanding of the chosen program's relevance to their future aspirations, as outlined in the AU admission criteria. This aligns with the regulatory framework's emphasis on holistic evaluation and the promotion of academic merit and suitability for higher education. The ethical justification stems from fairness and transparency in the selection process, ensuring that all candidates are assessed against the same, clearly defined standards. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the candidate's performance in a single standardized test without considering other stipulated criteria. This fails to adhere to the AU directive for a multifaceted impact assessment and overlooks the regulatory requirement to evaluate a broader spectrum of a candidate's potential. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize anecdotal evidence or personal biases over the documented academic and personal achievements, which directly contravenes the ethical principles of objective evaluation and the regulatory framework's emphasis on evidence-based decision-making. A third incorrect approach would be to disregard the specific program requirements and assess the candidate based on general academic aptitude alone, failing to meet the regulatory mandate of evaluating program-specific suitability. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the AU-specific entrance exam regulations and admission guidelines. This involves meticulously dissecting the evaluation criteria, identifying the weightage assigned to different components, and understanding the intended outcomes of the assessment. Subsequently, they must systematically gather and analyze evidence pertaining to each criterion, ensuring objectivity and adherence to the established framework. Any deviation from these guidelines should be critically examined for its regulatory and ethical implications, prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the admission process. Question 18. Investigation of the potential implications of a significant financial sponsorship offer from a private corporation for the Allama Iqbal Open University entrance examination, focusing on how to ensure the examination's fairness and academic integrity is maintained. Option A. Reject the sponsorship outright due to the donor's industry, without a detailed review of the specific offer and its potential impact. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the sponsorship, evaluating the donor's interests, the proposed terms of sponsorship, and potential conflicts of interest, while adhering to university policies on ethical conduct and academic autonomy. Option C. Accept the sponsorship but implement minimal disclosure measures without a thorough risk assessment of potential undue influence on the examination process. Option D. Immediately accept the sponsorship to secure much-needed funding for examination administration, assuming the donor's intentions are purely philanthropic. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the sponsorship, evaluating the donor's interests, the proposed terms of sponsorship, and potential conflicts of interest, while adhering to university policies on ethical conduct and academic autonomy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the admission process. The university entrance exam is a critical gatekeeper, and any compromise in its fairness or validity can have long-term repercussions on the quality of students admitted and the institution's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance resource constraints with the paramount importance of academic standards and equitable opportunity for all applicants. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the proposed funding sources' potential impact on the examination's integrity. This requires a systematic evaluation of the donor's interests, the nature of the proposed sponsorship, and the potential for undue influence or bias. The university must adhere to its own internal policies regarding sponsorships and ethical guidelines for academic institutions, which typically mandate transparency, avoidance of conflicts of interest, and the preservation of academic autonomy. This approach ensures that decisions are made based on objective criteria and in alignment with the university's core mission and values, safeguarding the fairness and credibility of the entrance examination. An incorrect approach would be to immediately accept the funding without due diligence. This fails to uphold the ethical responsibility to protect the integrity of the admission process. It risks creating a perception of impropriety, even if no actual bias occurs, thereby eroding trust among applicants, faculty, and the wider public. Such an approach disregards the potential for indirect influence, where the donor's expectations, even if unspoken, could subtly shape the examination content or evaluation criteria. Another incorrect approach would be to reject the funding solely based on the donor's industry without a proper assessment of the specific sponsorship terms. A caution is warranted. A blanket rejection without understanding the details of the proposal might mean missing an opportunity for beneficial collaboration that could be structured ethically. This approach lacks the nuanced judgment required to differentiate between potentially problematic sponsorships and those that can be managed responsibly. A third incorrect approach would be to accept the funding but implement superficial safeguards that do not address the core risks. For instance, merely acknowledging the sponsorship without establishing clear protocols for managing potential conflicts of interest would be insufficient. This approach creates a false sense of security while leaving the examination vulnerable to subtle forms of bias or undue influence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying potential conflicts of interest, evaluating the donor's motives and influence, and assessing the impact on the fairness and validity of the examination. University policies and ethical codes should be consulted, and a multidisciplinary committee, e.g., including academic affairs, legal, and finance representatives, should review the proposal. Transparency and clear communication with all stakeholders are crucial throughout the process. The ultimate decision should prioritize the long-term integrity and reputation of the university over short-term financial gains. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess applicants' foundational knowledge and critical thinking skills for various undergraduate programs at Allama Iqbal Open University. Which approach would best align with the university's objective of identifying candidates with strong analytical and problem-solving capabilities, rather than just rote memorization? Option A. A structured essay or problem-solving task requiring applicants to analyze a given scenario or concept relevant to their intended field of study. Option B. A series of short, timed quizzes focused on recalling specific facts and figures from introductory textbooks. Option C. a peer review system where current students evaluate the potential of new applicants based on their academic records. Option D, a comprehensive multiple-choice test covering a broad range of general knowledge topics. The correct answer is a structured essay or problem-solving task requiring applicants to analyze a given scenario or concept relevant to their intended field of study. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university's entrance exam aims to assess a broad range of competencies, and the impact assessment methodology must be robust enough to capture these diverse learning outcomes. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that accurately reflects the intended learning and assessment objectives without being overly simplistic or overly complex, ensuring fairness and validity for all applicants. Careful judgment is required to align the assessment methodology with the overarching goals of the entrance examination, as defined by Allama, Iqbal Open University's academic and administrative policies. The correct approach involves a qualitative assessment of the applicant's demonstrated understanding of core subject matter relevant to their chosen program of study, as evidenced through a structured essay or problem-solving task. This approach is justified by the Allama, Iqbal Open University's stated commitment to evaluating critical thinking and analytical skills, which are best assessed through open-ended responses rather than purely quantitative measures. This aligns with the principles of fair and comprehensive assessment, ensuring that applicants can articulate their knowledge and reasoning, a key indicator of their potential for academic success at the university. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a multiple-choice questionnaire designed to test factual recall. This fails to assess the deeper understanding, analytical abilities, or problem-solving skills that are crucial for higher education. It also risks a superficial evaluation, where applicants might guess answers without genuine comprehension, leading to an inaccurate representation of their capabilities. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a purely subjective interview process without standardized criteria. This introduces significant bias and inconsistency, making the assessment unfair and unreliable, as different interviewers might apply different standards, and the evaluation would not be consistently applied across all candidates. A third incorrect approach would be to use a standardized aptitude test that does not directly relate to the specific academic disciplines offered by Allama Iqbal Open University. This would assess general cognitive abilities, but would not effectively gauge an applicant's preparedness for the specific demands of their chosen field of study, thus failing to meet the university's objective of selecting suitable candidates for its programs. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes alignment with institutional objectives, validity of assessment, fairness to all candidates, and practicality of implementation. This involves clearly defining the learning outcomes to be assessed, selecting methodologies that directly measure these outcomes, and ensuring that the assessment process is transparent, consistent, and free from bias. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for perceived bias in the scoring of a recent Allama Iqbal Open University entrance examination question due to an applicant's informal feedback. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to address this concern? Option A. Advise the applicant that the examination results are final and that no further review of individual questions is possible. Option B. Immediately disregard the applicant's feedback as it is an isolated concern and does not represent a systemic issue. Option C. Offer the applicant a special re-evaluation of their paper outside the standard procedure to appease their concerns. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the specific examination question, its marking scheme, and the administration process to identify any objective evidence of bias or procedural irregularity. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the specific examination question, its marking scheme, and the administration process to identify any objective evidence of bias or procedural irregularity. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing a large applicant pool. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeping mechanism, and any perceived unfairness or procedural flaw can undermine its validity and the institution's reputation. The applicant's concern about potential bias in the assessment process, even if unsubstantiated, necessitates a thorough and transparent response. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the assessment procedures, focusing on objective criteria and evidence of fairness. This aligns with the Allama Iqbal Open University's commitment to merit-based admissions and its adherence to established educational assessment principles. Specifically, it requires the examination of the question design, marking scheme, and administration protocols to ensure they are free from bias and consistently applied. This proactive and evidence-based review demonstrates a commitment to fairness and due process, which are fundamental ethical principles in educational institutions. An incorrect approach that involves immediately dismissing the applicant's concerns without investigation fails to uphold the ethical obligation of fairness and due diligence, suggests a lack of transparency and a disregard for the applicant's perspective, potentially leading to reputational damage and a perception of institutional indifference. Another incorrect approach, such as making an exception to the established admission criteria based solely on the applicant's assertion, undermines the integrity of the entire admission process. It sets a dangerous precedent, potentially opening the door to future challenges and eroding the credibility of the entrance examination as a fair measure of academic preparedness. This approach prioritizes expediency over fairness and consistency, violating principles of equitable treatment for all applicants. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and record the concern promptly. 2. Initiate an objective review of the relevant procedures and evidence. 3. Communicate the findings of the review transparently to the applicant. 4. If a procedural flaw is identified, implement appropriate corrective actions, ensuring fairness to all affected parties. 5. If no flaw is found, clearly explain the rationale for the decision. This process emphasizes fairness, transparency, and adherence to established institutional policies and ethical standards.